right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for Better Together. Hopefully we have a group of administrators here. I'm trying to look at my view here and make sure I can see everybody. I'm Tara Tarango with the Van Andel Institute, and you might also see Dawn here. You can give a wave.
Hey, everyone.
She and I will be leading you through this next 30 minutes. We're going to hope to catch those who might join us a little bit late here. So thank you so much for taking some time to talk about what is really not like the most exciting topic of learning loss, but a very real and relevant topic, and a word that has all sorts of connotations with it. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But this is mostly about you guys learning from one another and having a chance to talk with other administrators, because so often we're in our own buildings or in our own districts and we don't get to actually communicate and learn from one another. So hopefully this is a chance for you guys to share some best practices and walk away with something that might give you a few tips on how to make next year a little bit better than what you might have otherwise been looking at. So I'm going to share my screen here. Give me one sec. And we'll walk you through a presentation. All right, hopefully you can see my screen. Give me a thumbs up. Awesome, okay. So as I said, that's what we're here to talk about. Hopefully if that's what you planned on, you're in the right place. We will get you out of here on time. We're really good about that, really cognizant of folks' time, especially after such a difficult school year. I think it's just been really tough to even get through it, much less start to think about next school year. So I encourage you to take all the time you possibly can to rest and rejuvenate this summer. But I commend you for also thinking about it, because as you know, July is like the fastest month in the whole entire year. It goes by so fast, and we'll be here at the next school year sooner than we want, but it's coming. So I appreciate you taking some time to think about that. So our little agenda for this time, for this hour, is to have a little bit of an introduction and welcome. Kind of, this is, again, it's about you guys sharing with one another. So I want you to feel comfortable doing that and knowing, you know, who each other are, maybe what type of schools we're working with, and sharing. And to facilitate that discussion, these are the three questions that we thought we'd kind of use to kind of prompt us. And obviously this is your time. So if there are other things you want to ask another administrator, feel free to put in more questions. You don't have to mute yourself. You can, you know, take yourself off of mute. You can type things in the chat, whatever works for you. But we're looking at specifically trying to understand from one another, how are we all defining learning loss as a term? Are we defining it? Are we using that term? Are we using something else? And then really kind of the bulk of it is, how are each of our schools looking to address this issue of any kind of gaps? And then what does your school need still to address those gaps, right? Maybe you'll hear from someone something they need and you're like, oh, I need that too. So again, hopefully you can learn from one another. And then we'll kind of finish this out with sharing. We've done quite a bit of research and spent some time talking to other administrators and looking at what's out there, and come up with 6 ways that we think schools can not just combat learning loss, you know, as kind of the term that's out there, but really to kind of a more positive spin would be to really thrive in sort of the aftermath of this pandemic. You know, how can we turn this into an opportunity? So we're going to share with you 6 ways to do that very quickly, and maybe how we can help you in that process if that seems like it would be of help. So that's what we're here to talk about. And at the end, we'll also give away a lunch and learn. So this is something we sometimes will do, where we'll provide, you know, a lunch for a group of your teachers and give them a couple of tidbits that we agree on ahead of time around a topic. Maybe it's differentiated instruction or student voice and choice or something like that, where they can, you know, feel appreciated with some free food, but also get some tips for the next school year for their classroom. So we'll give away one of those lunch and learns as well at the end. I also want to make sure, hopefully, if you registered early enough, you would have gotten a package that looked about like this. There's some fun little items in there that we'll get to play with in a minute. And there's also a little treat on the Better Together theme. If you registered a little bit later, it might not be at your doorstep just yet, but it is in the mail on its way to you. And if you don't have it, don't worry, you can still get everything you need out of this little webinar we got. So you can just play along a little bit differently, but I'll give you a modification if you didn't get your supplies in time. So I sort of said hi, but again, my name is Tara Tarango, and been with the Van Andel Institute now for about 5 years, and really enjoy our work and helping create classrooms all around the country where curiosity, creativity, critical thinking thrive. That's what we're here to do. So that's me. I'll let Dawn introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dawn McIder. I am the teacher programs manager here. I've been here roughly 5 years, but prior to joining Van Andel, I taught high school science for quite a few years. So just really excited to have you all here and excited to talk about this as well.
Exactly. And I wanted to also make sure you know that all of the resources that we might mention, especially when we get down to that, 6 things that you can do to overcome learning loss at the end, we'll have lots of resources in there. Those are all in this handout hyperdoc. And I believe we're going to put that into the chat right now. So if you want to, you can grab that and follow along. There's also a place to sort of take some notes as we have that discussion together. If you hear something from one of your peers that you want to jot down, you can do it there. Or you can obviously check that out later, but wanted you to have that URL to get access to the handout. So that's your Better Together team. And we'll start just by really addressing that elephant in the room, the term learning loss, right? It's starting to feel already like so many things in education, like some bad word. And I get it, right? There's so many times that in education, we tend to either focus on the negative, not we as actual educators, but sort of the society looking in at education, focusing on the negative or the sort of deficit model. What are we missing? But I do want to make sure, if you didn't know, where that comes from. So it comes from the actual legislation, from the American Rescue Plan. They say that this money is now available, this federal funds, the ESSER funds, and that's one of the 6 steps, just little preview there, that we'll be sharing with you, is to understand that ESSER funding. So we'll share some more information about that. But in that ESSER funding, in the American Rescue Plan, it says that you have to reserve at least 20% of your funds to address learning loss. So that's where that topic or that term comes from. Lots of other terms have been thrown around. Unfinished learning is a little more positive, or instructional loss might be another term, but whatever you call it, that's what, is sort of out there in terms of the legislation. But they're also they don't really define it in the legislation, but it's very, very broad. You can tell anything that's evidence-based, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But it can address social emotional learning. It can really support those underrepresented student groups. Those are some of the things that they call out. But as you'll see when we get to that section, it's very, very broad, but it's basically meant to tackle, this idea of what did we lose during the pandemic in terms of instructional time and maybe academic sort of understanding. So I also wanted to make sure, I agree with the folks out there that have a little bit of a concern about that term and looking at only the deficit model. So I love this tweet that Timothy Allen, not the comedian, but an educator, put out there. He said, COVID learning gaps, maybe, but my 5th grade daughter can cook herself 3 meals a day, responsibly logs in remotely for her education, and has technology skills beyond anything I can comprehend. These are life skills that the past year created. So not to put too, kind of rosy glasses of a spin on it, we know that there are certainly some positives that came out of it, but we also know that there are some gaps, right? There's definitely things that we did not get to do. We did not have as much face time with our students as we normally have, and that's going to result in some learning gaps. And so how can we bridge those gaps? That's really, I think, the big task that educators, both at the administrator and teacher level, are going to be facing next year. So before we get to talk one another and really dive into those questions, I always like to make sure you have something very practical that you can take away with you. And a lot of this discussion today are sort of big ideas around learning loss that might take you some mulling over to really kind of grapple with and see how you want to apply them. So to make sure you had something super practical, I wanted to do something, and this is where you're going to use your fun little bag of items. And, everyone loves, I'm joking here, a good icebreaker, right? But it is important that we kind of get ourselves sort of comfortable sharing with one another. This is about better together. It's about you being able to share your best practices. So what better way than to get us thinking and creating and brainstorming with a little strategy that we call create something. And I say it's practical because this is something at your next staff meeting you could do with your teachers and encourage them to do with their students. If you're really looking to have those classrooms where your students are comfortable thinking creatively, thinking outside the box, you've got to find time to do some of these things that get them and force them to think that way. So some of you are going to love this activity. Some of you are going to hate it. It's okay. I've done it. I know that's going to be the case, but it's only going to take us 4 minutes. Usually I say it's create because it takes 8 minutes. So with students, I do this with 8 minutes, but with administrators, I'm going to cut it in half. We're going to do 4 minutes of this. So here's how it's going to work. Like I said, some of you are going to love this, some of you are going to hate it, but just work with me. We're going to take the things in your bag. I'm going to have 8 items. So it's 8 items, 8 minutes, or in this case, 8 items, 4 minutes. And if you did not get a baggie, just find 8 items, find 4 items around your desk, doesn't matter. And step 1 is just to create something. I'm going to keep it super broad. I'm going to give you 1 minute, and then we're going to take 1 minute to share, hold up to the cameras here, what you created. Okay, like I said, work with me here. I think that you guys are going to come up with amazing stuff. I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute and say create something, keeping it intentionally very, very broad, not very many constraints here. So on your mark, get set. Let's do 1 minute, create something. Go. I'll give you some countdowns as we go, but I'm going to kind of peek around, see what you guys are working on. As I said, if you don't have your package, I've done this on many a Zoom meeting where you just find whatever's around you, and we've had some pretty fun results. So we're going to take 1 minute. You've got 40 seconds left. Create something. I see some of you staring down like you're working on something. Some of you don't have your cameras on. It's totally okay. I get it. Again, this is something you can do with your staff. It'll put them a little bit out of their comfort zone maybe sometimes, but I think that's a good thing. We're asking students to do that. We're asking teachers to help students do that. So let's experience that ourselves. We got 5 seconds left, people. All right, you heard it, that all familiar sound. Okay, I'm gonna poke around here. If you were able to create something in 1 minute, hold it up to your camera here and let me poke around, and maybe I'll call on someone to share what they came up with. Let's see. Of course, there we go. All right, I see. Let's see, who is that? Why don't I have a name here? All right, this is crazy. All right, lots of fun things. Okay, who wants to go? Someone can just start, see who wants to talk first, because I don't see names on my thing. Who wants to share what you made? Let's see. I wish I usually have names. Oh, here, maybe I'll ask to unmute. Maybe that's what I do. I picked somebody to ask to unmute.
All right, so my name is Greg from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hi, Greg.
I'm going to, hi, Dawn. I'm going to FC soccer game tonight after this is over. So this is a soccer goal and my soccer goalie, and I ran out of hand space for the soccer ball.
Excellent. Okay. So when I do this with teachers for students, I usually give 1 minute to call on maybe 1 or 2 people, and then you're already ahead of the game, because the next step, I find this interesting. It's one thing to give a really wide open set of instruction, like create something. But this third step says to turn it into a game. Make it some kind of function that you could play with somebody else. So I'm going to give you 1 more minute. You can add things from your list, or from your supplies, you can take some things away, but I'm gonna give you 1 minute and now add this other criteria. You got to make it do something, make it into a game. So let me find my timer and we're going to give 1 more minute. And again, usually with students, I would give them 3 minutes to create something, 1 minute to share, and then 3 minutes to turn it into a game, and 1 minute to share. So it becomes 8 things, 8 minutes. The only other tip I'd give you is it's good to have something that's kind of fastens, whether it's tape or string or these, pipe cleaners. That kind of helps out a little bit. If you don't have anything to bind things together, that can be a little bit of a challenge. Ooh, someone's outside. That looks fun. It's a nice day. We have 20 seconds left to turn it into a game. Well, now I can see the names. I'm curious to see what we come up with. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, should have given you a 5-second warning. 5-second warning. And hold up to your camera if you were able to build something that turned it into a game. Let's see, who wants to talk now? Let me call on, how about, I'm gonna ask you to unmute here. Did I click? There we go.
Hey, my name is Angie Hansen. I'm from Oskaloosa, Iowa. And I just created a little catch thing that has a toothpick in the middle. So if you can get it in there, you get 1 point. And if you can get it stuck on the toothpick, you get 2.
Ah, excellent. How fun is that? So as I said, some people are, hand clap for everybody. Thanks for playing along. Again, something you could try your next staff meeting if you want them to look at you like you're a little crazy, but also get them comfortable knowing that you're willing to try new and different things and that you want them to try new and different things with their students. So maybe that's something you can use to infuse a little creativity and critical thinking. And think about how that was to create something, that was one set of stress. But it was a whole nother set of stress to think, how do I turn it into a game and make it do something? So I love putting that kind of pressure on students and getting them to think that way. And then seeing when they think, I can't do that, and they come up with something. It's such a rewarding feeling. So thanks for playing along. That's our create something. We'll get back into learning loss now that you've had a chance to talk to one another a little bit. We'll just keep this group. Sometimes we have a large group of these and we'll break out into breakout rooms, but we've got a good manageable number here. We'll all just stay together. And let's start with this first question. How is your school defining learning loss? We'll take about 20 minutes here to discuss all three of these questions. We can pop in and out. This is, like I said, your time. So who wants to start with how are you defining learning loss? Are you using that term? What are y'all thinking about it? You're gonna make me call on people. Who is using learning loss in their school? Anybody? Okay, so how are you defining it? Are you using like test scores? Are you
using our test scores that we just got back? I'm Jenna Black. I'm from Portage, Indiana. We just got our state scores unembargoed, so we've been combing through them, disaggregating the data, and then using that to drive instruction and kind of plan out. I'm sure it's no surprise that there was a huge downturn in scores, and it's what we expected. So now it's where do we go from here? So as a district, we are making a plan to bridge those gaps through RTI process, through an MTSS process district-wide, and really aligning those arrows.
Mhm.
Anybody else doing the same thing? Anybody else finding something different? Anybody have test scores that kind of surprise them in a different way? Or
Yeah, so I'm just north of Cincinnati. I'm Greg, principal. I've been here for 18 years, and we're kind of looking at differentials between 2019 and 2021. So we look at our Ohio test scores and our MAP scores from pre-pandemic, and then we took them again this year. Now we were lucky; we've been in school every day last school year.
oh wow,
So from August 15th until we ended up right at Memorial Day, we were in school, 6 feet apart, masks, 1,000 gallons of hand sanitizer, but we made it through, and it worked out really well. So not surprisingly, but not surprisingly, because I've got a really strong staff, we didn't drop as much as we thought. We were predicting 10-15% drops of just kids that passed our different levels of testing, and we averaged around 5 to 7% less than we had pre-pandemic. So I think a big thing with my staff, and I think all of your guys' staffs, is we have really good teachers that are able to work around those hurdles. And we're going to institute an MTSS process as similar to what she had said. But one thing we're going to do is every day for about 35 minutes, our enrichment and intervention time, we're going to stop all core instruction, and we're going to take a whole entire grade level and break them out on, based on what they need. So we're going to have groups that need reading support, groups that need math support. Kids that are fine will be getting enrichments, but we don't teach any core instruction during that time. So that's all just time set aside to try to intervene with the kids that need to be intervened with. So
that's a really creative approach. That's something I know Dawn is going to talk about a little bit later. And it's the struggle between, kind of remediation. And sometimes that means then they're just missing out on that core content. So what you think you're doing and helping them is actually getting them further behind. But this idea that no one's getting core, everyone's just kind of taking a break from that, kind of a creative solution to that.
Mm-hmm.
I applaud that. What else are you guys finding, whether it's using the term learning loss or ways that you're planning to try to bridge it next year? What other ideas you guys are doing?
I would say I'm a curriculum director in Iowa, and just like Greg said, we were in school face-to-face all year long. But what we're seeing is we use what's called fast screener data, K8, and we've seen some differentials, but our biggest need have really been with those kids that were in first grade during that spring. So this last year's second graders, just that critical period of time. And so we've really been working on building a lot of their skills that they missed, and giving some extra help there. But across the district K-12, the biggest loss that I'm seeing is more social emotional skills, executive skills, how quickly students, even though we were face to face, I don't know how to put it, how quickly they would get to that frustration level of giving up. So what we're really focusing on social emotional learning and setting aside a time K-12 every day. That's just that, as well as we do have time set aside, which we call what I need or win time K-12 every day, that there is no core instruction and kids are getting interventions or extensions based on their needs. But we're also putting some time aside for that social emotional piece, because that's really been the biggest losses that we've seen. And some of the things at the high school level, like just getting your work done, getting back into that routine of responsibility and getting things done. Kids have been just overwhelmed really quickly with stuff. And so have teachers, to be quite honest, and so have I. So I think that's where we're really trying to build those supports, just as much as academics.
That makes sense. What else are you guys finding? Anything that you are looking for that you need to help, like you're like, I have this gap and I don't yet have a way to fill that, or I'm not sure how we're going to do that. It seems like most of you are thinking about carving some time. There's a couple of, that is, which is going to be an interesting, I think, experiment. And like I said, a creative solution to that. But any other ideas or holes that you're missing that maybe someone can help fill? Is anybody finding, one of the things I think is interesting is we did some research trying to look for what are, nationally, what is this learning loss gap, to identify it. And you can find a report for everything you want it to say, right? You can find reports that say, there's been huge drops in actual academic understanding, but you can also find ones that say that there's been no drop, or that there was a drop by the end of this past year, it caught back up. So, who really knows, right? But you guys know your students. And so I think using your own data is a really smart kind of idea there, that I think a lot of you guys have hit on. What about, what are you doing for your teachers to help, prepare them for this? What kinds of things are you, in that extra time that you have decided to carve out? Or is it all your core teachers leading that? Or are there certain teachers you're pulling out to do that? How are you working that?
So with ours, we use we got sixth grade teachers, for example. So we sort all those kids out between those six. I have a single reading teacher and I have a part-time ESL teacher, and then I have myself and our school counselor. So we'll take, I think that's 10 of us, 11 of us total, and we'll divide the kids out based on those 11 people. So I might have 35 kids in the makerspace. A rotation of 35 kids. So that way my reading teacher and my ESL teacher can have 5 or 7. And so it's just kind of that staggered giant spreadsheet and break it down by who needs what. But yeah, we all jump in together. And again, being a building principal, it's 35 minutes a day that I work with 6th graders and 35 minutes a day that I work with 4th graders. So if I can't find 70 minutes out of my 8-hour day to work with kids, then I'm really thinking I'm doing something wrong. So, yeah. And it's fun. I like it. It gets me back with the kids. So, but that's kind of what we do, is we sit down as a team with all the kids and kind of, stratify them of who's great, move on. And even the kids that are getting reading instruction or math instruction, they're still coming to the makerspace once a week because they need to have that opportunity as well. So it's within 1 quarter, every kid will be in there for 10 days.
Okay.
It might be 10 straight days. It might be 1 day a week for 10 weeks. But I'm guaranteeing each kid to be in there for 10 days.
Okay. What's been the response of parents to that idea? Have you rolled this out to them yet, or?
So our incoming 3rd grade students, we have 138. We've had 90 come in on tours. And so when they walk in there and they first notice the video gaming section, because I went to Half Price Books and bought an old Sega, bought an old Atari, bought an old PlayStation, and of course I've got it up and running, they are just beside themselves with excitement of being able to use that, or being able to use our Sphero race course, or going to our building station. Like they're just so excited about coming back without masks and be able to play and do stuff that they haven't been able to do. So yeah, so our just initial test run on those 90 some families, we're good. We're good to go.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts on how you're kind of staffing or preparing staff to kind of overcome that learning loss gap? Anyone else want to share? Is that something you're getting a lot of parents asking about? Are they hearing this term learning loss and like worried about it? And what are you going to do for my kids? Or is it not really filtering into the parent level yet? You guys are a quiet group today.
I was curious, Tara, if any of the administrators have been working with teachers already this summer. I know that this is definitely a time where teachers probably want a little bit of a break from this craziness of the school year. So not sure if things have started in the works, or if they're looking at, later this summer to start bringing the teachers back to do this work. So curious on your plans for PD for your staff.
Anybody working with teachers over the summer?
Yeah.
Looks like not so much, huh? You're waiting for fall?
Yeah.
Good. I think that's really good. I mean, like you talked about social emotional learning for the students, but also social emotional well-being for the teachers is really huge, and for yourselves, which we're going to talk about in a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Well, we have some information to share. Any other questions for one another in this sort of learning from one another stage? Either something you want to share that you're doing that's working, or something you wonder about another administrator, what they're doing, before we move on to some other information for you. You good? All right. Very good. Well, then I will keep going here and gonna share a little bit, maybe just take a chance to reflect and maybe write in the chat. What's maybe one thing that you took away from something you heard from one of the administrators, or something that we've talked about so far? Maybe one takeaway you have so far. Maybe write that in the chat if you would, so we can kind of see what takeaways we're finding. Let's see here. Chat. All right, perfect. Looking at curriculum gaps. Perfect. Okay. All right. Hopefully there's something. It's raining here. Oh, internet glitchy. Got it. I was just looking at that. Learning loss is not just academic. That's a good tip. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Absolutely.
Yeah. So some people like that idea of bridging the gaps. I like that win time, what I need. And someone else just wrote that too. Building in time for social emotional skills. So good. Hopefully you guys could grab something from that and take hold of that. Like I said, it's not very often we get to sort of hear from one another and share those ideas. So we'll take you through, like I said, these 6 ways schools can thrive in the aftermath, or really combat this idea of learning loss. And this is a very condensed version of a full summit that we did not too long ago. We're also gonna have a white paper that will come out in about a week with lots more information around this, but the handout has all the links to some of these resources that hopefully will help you as you look to make your plans for next year and overcoming this term, or this reality of learning loss. So Dawn will take us through the first 2 steps of the plan, and I'll take you through the last 4.
Great, excellent. So the first step is to have a plan, right? We know how important it is to have a plan, not only in any school year, but especially in a school year such as this. You're coming off of the end of a pandemic. Things have been incredibly uncertain, and there's going to be some gaps, whether you call the learning loss or not. But there are going to be some gaps that need to be identified and dealt with. So the first tip to help you plan, to focus your efforts, is more of just a mindset shift. And thinking about this as a time, and from what I've been seeing and hearing already, that you're already there. You're already, envisioning what your school can be. But you're really thinking this as an opportunity to refocus, reimagine your school and what that means for education. Secondly, focusing on that quality core instruction. Now, I've heard some really creative solutions about, there is a time and place for remediation. We know that, but we also know that it's not the answer, because we don't want to take the students away from that quality core instruction, because they'll just get further and further behind. So finding ways to have a really good balance and providing opportunities where the students are engaged in authentic learning, where it's not the learn it, test it, forget it cycle, where they're constantly going back to that content and revisiting it in some sort of authentic way, like project-based learning. The third tip is to think about your summer programming, and you're probably in the middle, or maybe you're nearing the end of that right now if you do have summer programming, or your after school programs, and finding creative ways to use that as acceleration opportunities to bring those students to where they need to be. And we've had some success with summer camps recently this summer that have done project-based learning to help them get to where they need to be, to get them ready for this fall. And it's been very powerful. The next tip is really evaluate your evaluations, right? Evaluate the tools that you use to collect data. Make sure it's clear and actionable, and make sure that you don't have too many or there's overlap. So really look at what assessments you're giving. What are the most powerful assessments? What's really telling you what's going on at the classroom level? And really, who can tell you that better than the teachers and the students themselves, right? The formative assessment is so important. The best data comes from the classroom level. So making sure that your teachers are trained up on the best practices for formative assessment. We put together a strategy sheet that you can share with your teachers. It's again in that handout hyperdoc that's linked in the chat there. You can share that with your teachers, maybe at an upcoming staff meeting. Just some tips and tricks to really help them get that formative data that they can use for their instruction, but also share with you to really get a pulse on what's going on in the classroom. So elevating the power of formative assessment. And then obviously going to the source, going to your teachers, getting their input. What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are they learning? What did happen last year? If you haven't gotten a chance to, maybe consider surveying them. We've put together 2 surveys that you can give to your either elementary or secondary teachers to really allow them to reflect on the learning that happened and that learning that may not have happened because of the pandemic last year, and using that then to plan for this fall, working in their PLC groups, working in their grade level or content teams. And lastly, focusing on what is most important to teach. We know that standards are not all created equal, and there's way more standards than there is time to teach them. We all know that. We've all felt that struggle. So we put together a tool to help teachers and administrators or curriculum directors to decide what is the most important standards to teach. We're looking at the core content standards, K-8, and we've put together a spreadsheet, and we've walked through how you can score those, and then it will actually spit out what are your power standards that you want to focus on this school year. So those were the 7 tips to help you plan and focus your efforts. But as Angie so eloquently put it, social emotional learning, if you don't have the social emotional learning built in, all of that planning is for naught, because we know how important that is. So I just wanted to share with you a couple of resources and things to consider to help you address the social and emotional needs of your students, of your teachers, and yourself. And I'm going to go through this very quickly, but again, that resource that Tara had mentioned, that's going to be coming out in a week, that big white paper is going to have a ton of follow-up content to this as well. But if we take a look at our students, if you're familiar with CASTLE and the core competencies, they've developed an SEL roadmap. And I think it's a really fabulous kind of guidepost. It's something to help you really identify where are you on that roadmap to integrating social emotional learning in your classroom. Once you've identified where you're at, then they put together some tips and strategies to help you get to where you need to be. So that's one resource there. Again, that's in the handout hyperdoc. Secondly, providing your teachers with the strategies, regardless of the grade level or the content they teach, because SEL isn't just for elementary, right? It is for K-12. How you approach it, how you teach it, how you integrate it may look a little different, but a lot of the strategies can be used K-12. So what we did is we put together strategies of those 5 core competencies that can be used by K-12 teachers, regardless of the grade level or content you teach. And again, that's in the hyperdoc. We know that social emotional learning is important for our teachers, especially after this past year and a half. So making sure that we're investing in our teachers, those small gestures, those small things that you do that tell the teacher that you value them and you care for them, make a huge difference. And make sure you're also looking at the social emotional needs of yourself. Take your own advice. The advice you give your teachers, do it yourself. But I know that's hard. It's very hard to do, but it is so important. And try to find that time for those big picture things at your school, those culture, those strategizing pieces. I know it's very easy to get sucked into the day-to-day high urgency, high important tasks. And those long-term strategizing can sometimes get put off the wayside, the staff development, all those things. But really trying to find the time for that is so important. And I just wanted to share with you just 7 really quick tips. And these are things I'm sure you already do, many of them, but just to remind you that they are very important to your teachers and they go a long way. So the first one is just find as many opportunities to celebrate and affirm them. Do shout outs at staff meetings, put post-it notes in mailboxes, put on your calendars to remember to get to everyone at least once, maybe in a semester. Rethink your meetings. Any housekeeping items that you can do via email, send them an email, or maybe possibly do a video, send it that way, and then spend that time in your staff on more of those collaborative, PD-focused types of engagements. The third tip to address the social and emotional needs is to make sure you're just asking your teachers, asking for their input. What are they seeing? How are they doing? How are their students doing? Just constantly having those conversations with them. And fourth, you being there makes all the difference. And we work with a lot of teachers in professional development. And I can tell you firsthand how important it is when the administrator is able to be there. It's fabulous, because not only does it show that you're valuing the professional development that they're doing, but you're also valuing their time. And that goes a long way. And remember that you are the coach, right? So turning those conversations that you have with your teachers into more of those coaching, reflective type of conversations is always very important and very valuable. I love this. This is from my friend. Well, he's not really my friend. I wish he were, but I really like him. Jerry Brooks. If you're familiar with him, check him out on YouTube. But he does these object lessons. And one thing he does for all of his teachers at the beginning of the year, he gives them each a light switch. And he lets them decorate it. It's a big deal. But the idea behind it is you want the physical reminder that you need to turn off your educator brain. You know, I'm giving you permission to take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, whatever time you decide, but you turn that switch off and turn off your educator brain. Same thing for administrators, making sure that we're turning off our administrator brain as well. And lastly, equip your teachers. Showing them that you care about them, that you're investing in them, give them that training and resources that really do support their well-being. And we've put together some resources and strategies again, that you can share with your teachers to help them decrease their stress, increase productivity, and avoid burnout. So maybe something that you want to share at the beginning of the school year that they can do in their staff meetings and take a look at together. So those are the main tips there for social emotional needs. And now we're going to go on to funding.
Yeah, fun stuff with funding. I love it. Dawn, shared, like, those were really big picture items. The first thing is have a plan, and she walked you through those 7 tips of a plan, and then to address those social emotional needs, and gave lots of tips. I feel like you've got your first, probably month worth of staff meetings if you wanted to with some of those resources there. So now these are a little bit more discrete items we'll get to with 3, 4, 5, and 6 and the ways to combat learning loss. And 3 here is just understanding that ESSER funding. And I could go into a lot of detail on this, but some of you may know more about it. Some may have not looked into it yet. But this is what I call, to be cute, the ESSER compressor, compressing everything that you might want to know about all the ESSER funding into one tiny little chart that would fit on a PowerPoint slide. But essentially, it's the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. That's what ESSER stands for. And if you're not familiar with the basics, this gives you that there were 3 installments with 3 different pieces of legislation. So in March of 2020, right as the pandemic hit, we came out with the CARES Act, which gave $13 billion to schools to be awarded by the state within 1 year of receiving it And looking at, you can cover those costs always going back to March of 2020, and that can go all the way through September coming up here of 2021. And then we realized, there's still a lot more that needs to be done. So in December 2020 was ESSER 2, or the second legislation with the CRRSA Act, and that added $54 billion to this fund. Again, it's awarded to the states. We'll talk about how that's allocated as well. But that can be used through September of 2022. And then the most recent one, this past March in 2021, was a big chunk of change. And I have to say, really, never has there been in our living history this amount of funding available to really support the kind of schools and districts that really we wanted all along. So going back to Dawn's first point, under Have a Plan, is looking at this as a kind of a mindset shift of not just an issue we have to deal with, but an actual opportunity. I see a lot of folks doing that. Not that funding is everything, but it certainly helps. This is really a chance to think about, what is the school that I would like to see? And is this a chance to sort of put some funding behind that to make that happen? And they're looking to get this out, very expediently. Once states apply for that and get that, they are looking to get it in the hands of districts. So $122 billion as part of that legislation. And just so you get a sense, that money is allocated to states in the same proportion as Title I. So the same way, states get their Title I money is how it's proportioned out for this ESSER funding. But what's interesting about this is there's definitely a clear sort of indication that it needs to go to what they call local education agencies, or really districts. So about 10% can stay with the state education agency, but only 10%, at least 90% must go to actual districts. And then here's where that learning loss term comes in. Of that 90% that goes to the districts, to the local education agencies, at least 20% has to go toward learning loss. And then the rest of it can go toward any other allowable expenses. But learning loss is really the focus of all of that money. If you want to see even further how that money is allocated, or you're just kind of nosy, or you want to see for yourself, this is a great resource, again, in that hyperdoc that will show for every state. You can look it up. The National Conference of State Legislatures has this resource, and you can see how much money was allocated to each state in each one of those ESSER 1, 2, and 3. So here I just put in a screenshot of Michigan, where I happen to be. You can see how much money Michigan got for ESSER 1, 2, and 3. If you happen to be from Illinois, here's one there. You can look at that. I think I put one more in here. I did. Indiana. I think we might have had somebody from Indiana. But again, you can go to this link. It's in that hyperdoc, and you can see exactly how much money your state has received to date. But if you want to be even nosier or more interested, more curious is a nicer way to put it, you can also go, every state Department of Education has to put on their website, has to publish how those funds are being allocated within the state. So here's an example from Michigan's Department of Education website, where you can see how much each school district is actually being allocated. And these aren't always the easiest to find in every Department of Education, but we've gone through a few of them. So if you don't see your state easily, let us know. We're happy to help find that for you if that's something you're interested in. But just wanted you to have a sense of how that ESSER money is, how much it is, and how it is being allocated. And then, so what that really means for you is how can you use it? And as I mentioned, it's super, super broad. So under learning loss, any of these are things that are explicitly kind of talked about in there, whether that's assessments, either summative or formative. As Dawn mentioned, after school or extended day programs, or summer learning for those enrichment programs. Those are both explicitly mentioned. Extended school year programs, professional development, instructional materials, even family communications is listed there under learning loss to make sure you're kind of working with families to help supplement any of those gaps. And of course, under other, there's all the other stuff that you're having to deal with in terms of, dealing with the pandemic, whether that's safety and reopening, or coordinating your different efforts. Mental health services is listed under there. So there's just tons and tons of examples and a lot of flexibility with this. And if you are interested, also in that handout is a link to the actual legislation. So if you're not sure whether something is covered or not, you can always look there and kind of take a look for yourself at the actual document. It's not too hard to read, actually. The big thing that comes across is evidence-based. And I think I actually really like this term as an alternative, even not that research-based isn't important. Research-based is definitely important, but I like evidence-based. I kind of don't care if some researcher in, Columbia University found this to be effective. I want to know if another principal at another school found evidence that this improves teaching and learning in their school. So I like that kind of way of looking at it. So after we looked at ESSER funding, that's the third one. These next three kind of go together. So 4, 5, and 6 are all about equipping your teachers with that sort of next level professional development, resources, and ongoing support. So I'm going to put those all together right now, and then I'll break each one apart. But when we look at this fourth tip, it's really about building capacity and honoring the profession of teacher by giving, flexible and customized professional development, allowing teachers some choice in that. The fifth one, and these kind of go together, I think, really well, is not just give them the professional development, but provide the resources to make that happen. So by providing instructional resources, you're ensuring that implementation is actually happening, not just hoping it happens because you told them why it's important, but you're actually giving them the tools to do it. I think also instructional resources, really good ones, can model those best practices. So, teachers can see, oh, that's how a lesson plan should go together, that sort of thing. And of course, teacher time is just hugely in demand, right? Very valuable. So anything that saves them time, I think, will help you get your goals met in terms of teaching and learning that they need to accomplish for you. And then finally, that ongoing support, so that all of this works together to equip your teachers. That they have the PD, the instructional resources, and the ongoing support so that they can differentiate and customize different tips and strategies for your different teachers at different levels. Things like that help you really maximize that PD investment. So it's not just a, in the same way we talked about getting out of the cycle of, teach it, test it, and forget it. Same thing with PD, right? We sort of deliver it and then they forget it as soon as they walk out the door. That ongoing support helps you really maximize that investment and see change in classrooms. And also ensures that accountability and efficacy. That's where you can say, let's try this strategy. Let's see which ones work for you. Let's adapt it, make it your own. And then they're really adding that to their arsenal year after year, not just sort of taking it and leaving it. So again, I'll give you some examples of and some different checklists and things like that that you can use to really address these last three tips together. So preparing teachers with flexible and customized PD. So when you're looking at professional development, we think it's really important to think about, identifying your key content areas. What are the areas that you and your staff feel like are going to be in most demand next year? And if you would find this helpful, it's about a 5-minute survey you can do, and we'll give you a free report that kind of really captures your needs analysis. So it'll say, here's the areas where, you've got strength with your teachers. Here's some areas that you might want to consider looking at professional development for. And you can either fill that out yourself, or if you want to get your teachers' input, we can help you do that. We can send this survey out to your teachers and then pull it together into that needs analysis report for you. But that'll help, whether you work with us for PD or you work with anybody for PD, you use it within your own staff. It'll just help you give a sense for what are those areas that you need to be focusing on for next year. And again, the link to that is in that handout document, and it might also be in the chat room as we go through. We'll put that in there. But in identifying those key content areas, every school is going to be a little bit different, but we have put together what we think are those key areas given the pandemic. There are certain topics that have definitely risen to kind of the top as some important topics. So here are some of the workshops that we find are getting a lot of attention, and learning sessions. And that goes to flexible delivery of content. Once you have those key content areas identified, make sure that you're able to give a flexible delivery. So what we mean by that is there's still a place, I think, for full day workshops in person. There's some teachers in stereotyping or people. There's something nice about being together and going in depth and spending a day really on your own learning and remembering what it's like to learn something. All that's really great. But to get that ongoing support that we talked about, this idea of learning sessions, sort of maybe monthly or periodically touching base with a 1 hour on a very specific topic, such as these, is really, really helpful. So coming up with those content areas that are important to you through, say, a needs analysis, but then also looking at ways to deliver that content flexibly, because nobody has 5, 10 PD days in a school year. You're lucky if you have 2. Also, put together the sort of post-pandemic PD checklist. So thinking there's some trends in PD that I think are not going to go away anytime soon after the pandemic. So you can take a look at that and sort of what's important to look for as you kind of make your PD plan for next year. And then finally, once you have your content and you have that flexible delivery of it, then think of how you're going to measure success. One of the things that's really important to us is that if we work with schools, we define learning objectives at the very beginning. So for each engagement, whether that's a full day workshop or a 1 hour session, what is it that teachers need to feel more comfortable and confident and competent in by the end of that time with us? And that's how we, kind of interpret evidence-based to see those learning objectives pre and post really increase. So next one after PD is, like I said, it's one thing to tell them this is why this is important, or this is how it works, but it's a whole nother thing to give them the what, give them the actual tools to implement that. So I want to show you a 2-minute video here of kind of project-based learning in action. And as you think about learning gaps, that's one of the things that we think can be really powerful as you reimagine schools, is to use that authentic learning, because you can do so much, whether that's enrichment or remediation, but everyone's working on the same project in this authentic PBL experience, or this authentic learning experience. So I'll show you this 2-minute video. You can kind of get a sense of what that looks like. And then we can talk about what teachers' response will be to that if you gave them resources to do it versus if they didn't. So we'll take 2 minutes here and watch this video.
In this program, they learned about Mars and Earth. They got into teams, and they learned how to make commercials. And then they use those commercials to convince people to give to their causes.
Please donate to Earth. There's so many things that kept me curious, like the mystery box, the commercials, and growing plants. I really like being in charge of writing the commercials and telling people what to do. I really like getting my hands on the worms, the dirt, and the plants. It was really fun. We raised almost $400 doing it. It was so much fun, and I loved doing it. And I learned a lot.
All right, so hopefully that gives you a sense of, what authentic learning can look like in the classroom. And then teachers do professional development, they get a sense of how they can build that. But if you just showed them that video or said, let's do project-based learning, and then said, go, a lot of teachers are going to look at you like this, right? You want me to do what? And we want to avoid that, right? We want to support them. So imagine that same, let's say, video of something like that you wanted your teachers to recreate, but they had the project plan and supplies to be able to do that. They had the real world connections. So they had everything they needed to bring in, a NASA expert to talk to the class, let's say. They had all the content connections so that they could connect it to whatever different content areas, whether it's math, science, ELA, and social studies, how they could bridge to all those different content standards that you've identified for them. And you gave them collaboration opportunities. You gave them ideas for here's how you could collaborate, not only within this classroom, but with another classroom, maybe across the country doing the same project. If you gave them those prompts and those connections to be able to do that. And you embedded some PD so that they could, take a quick 10-minute video maybe and learn how something they're doing this project could apply more broadly across their full capacity of teaching. So if you provide those kinds of supports, those are the kinds of resources that we're talking about in terms of saving the teacher time and getting that evidence base. So, we want projects or resources, whatever it is you're looking to do with your teachers and what gains or changes you want to see in their instruction. You want to give them resources where they say, 100% of the teachers using Blue Apple projects are saying it increased creative and critical thinking. You want that kind of evidence behind the resources that you are giving to your teachers. And then finally, we got PD, we got resources, and that ongoing support. So one of the things I think is just hugely important, and it's so much about the relationship between coach and teacher, but some form of coaching is so important. And so looking at coaching, looking at personalized action plans, so that one of the things teachers hate the most is when they go to professional development and it's something that they learned 3 years ago, or that, that they feel personally very competent in. So being able to work with teachers at an individual level to say, what are the things that you want to see happen this year, see improvement in, and create those personalized action plans, and having coaches work with them through that. Or another form of ongoing support that we'd like to do is having students come, whether that's in person or virtually, to field trips. And we've done a lot of this lately, especially when it comes to science and not always having time for science, especially in a year where we're overcoming gaps, mostly focused on math and reading. So, lean on, different providers. We're happy to do this, or if there's someone in your community that can do a student field trip, especially for something like science, it gives the teachers an opportunity to look at it like an observational learning lab, to say, here's some different strategies that we talked about in professional development. Let's see this teacher do it with my own kids. It's really powerful to turn those field trips into learning labs, and that can be a form of that ongoing support. So there's a few of the field trips that we do most often with some of our folks. So I know that was a lot to give you. And like I said, there's a full white paper around it, but hopefully we wanted to give you just a little overview of that. Just to recap those 6 points, there was just the idea of having a plan, and we gave you that sort of 7-point plan to kind of work with that Dawn walked you through. Addressing social emotional needs, understanding and using that ESSER funding, and then preparing teachers with flexible and customized PD, equipping them with practical instructional resources, and giving them meaningful ongoing support. I'm curious, just take a second to put into the chat which of these, you can put the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if you want, or you can put the words in there, but which of these do you find most helpful? I'm going to kind of get a sense of which things you think would be helpful in overcoming learning loss. Look at the chat here. All right. Okay, we got all really 5, equipping teachers with instructional resources, 3 and 4 around ESSER funding and PD. Some of those ideas from part 1 of the plan, very good. Definitely going to steal some. That's what it's all about. Thank you. All right, Joanna, no problem. We're going to round out here with just how we can help. Like we said, we have tried to support teachers, support principals in creating this learning loss sort of plans. And we put together what we call our sample learning loss recovery plan. And it just combines those different elements of professional development. So these are some of the topics that we think are really rising to the top or getting requested most in light of the pandemic. The idea that maybe, early on in the fall, there might be a couple of full day workshops, but then kind of monthly touching base on very specific topics like equity and project-based learning or engagement hooks. Continuing that kind of throughout the year, but with these sort of short sessions that aren't taking a huge amount of time from your teachers. And then really balancing that with some Blue Apple projects like the one you just saw, The Dirty Truth, and then ongoing coaching, action plans, and those science field trips. So we've kind of put together that as a kind of complete idea, but we're very happy to customize a plan that works for you. You can find details about that particular learning loss recovery plan at blueappleteacher.org and just click on learning loss recovery plan if you don't want to memorize that whole link. And of course, aligning that to ESSER funding, all those pieces, as we said, it's very broad, so you can certainly do that. I'm not going to make you write in the chat here, but think about which of those VAI supports might help you. We'd love to help with either Flex PD, Blue Apple projects, instructional coaching, student field trips. As I said, we can do those virtually or in person. So hopefully some things you took away, our discussion around learning loss with each other, kind of what we're doing. We've got some great ideas that what I need time, a couple of you are doing that. Some really good ideas to take away from one another. And then hopefully that's 6 ways schools can overcome learning loss. Maybe you took something away from there with having that plan and each of the different 6 elements. Maybe you'll want to use the modeled strategy to create something that we did with our little bag of tricks that you can use any 8 objects. So maybe you'll try that with your students, or maybe you will take part in any of our learning loss recovery plan options. So all those links to those in the handy hyperdoc. And we got 1 minute left here. I just want to let you know we will be choosing someone who participated here to get a lunch and learn giveaway. So this is where we would do a short little PD session with your staff and provide them lunch as a thank you. So if you're interested in any of those, we're also offering a discount for coming to us here for the Better Together event. If you book any of those by October 31st, you'll get 20% off. And it all starts with completing that free needs analysis. So you can check out that in the hyperdoc that will give you access to that needs analysis. And hopefully you'll get a report that will be helpful to you And I look forward to hopefully working with you on making your school dreams come true next year. And in case no one's told you, because people don't tell administrators enough, yeah, I went there. Thanks a million. I can't help it. Kind of punny. But really, thanks a million for all that you do. This summer has been really, really hard. And as you're already here kind of spending some time thinking about next year, I really, really commend you and thank you for all you do for your students and your teachers and your schools. So if we can help, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you for joining us and we look forward to talking more.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
If you're interested in a Lunch and Learn drawing, Ben just put it in the chat box, so it should be right there. So if you're interested in getting signed up for that, so we're going to announce that winner tomorrow, right, Tara?
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, you can check that out in the chat box. Fill that out. It's a quick form. I think it's 2 questions.
Yeah, name.
So it's not hard. Your name and email. So we will pick someone for that tomorrow and let you know. So yeah, thank you. You've got to do that. I can't just telepathy pick somebody. That doesn't work. All right, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Gotcha. Yes.